What's up, storyteller? I'm Clark Rowanson, the Magic Engineer, and it's time to talk about magic. In this video, I'm going to be talking about one of the topics I actually covered in one of my live streams, so the format may be a little bit different than you're used to. I sure hope you still enjoy the content, and we're going to jump over to that right now. From here, I figured we could actually talk through some case studies and actually look at some of my favorite systems and talk through how they have it set up. So I guess we'll go ahead and jump over to some of the case studies. And I've got my whiteboard. Hopefully this will show up the way I want for you guys. First thing I wanted to look at and talk about with you guys was Cralwer Carl and Veridian Gate Online. Reason for that is the power arc in those is pretty standard, where it's just linear. Just every level you get a set number of stats. Every level you get a set number of stats that you can allocate how you want, and it is that way from the beginning to the end. There are some little bumps and changes and squiggles as you get things like you hit the class unlock, or in Cralwer Carl, they can pick their new race, they can pick their class, they can pick their advanced class. But that really just gives them, it's less about a boost in power level and more about a refinement of play style. So when the race is a little different in Cralwer Carl. Depending on the one you pick, it can be a boost, but again, that's more about feeding into the play style you want. And then with the progression, both of those are, again, so VGO is a little different. VGO is what you would expect from a standard MMORPG, where it's that exponential decay I was talking about, basically just like WoW. Going through the first 10 levels happens pretty quick, but then things start slowing down and you have to do more and more epic stuff to get those levels to go up. Pretty standard. So that's VGO. Cralwer Carl is interesting because Matt Dinneman does it in such a way that technically it's operating the way VGO does, where the pool of experience you need from level to level is increasing and getting bigger with each level. But he manages it narratively in such a fashion that it feels more linear, which is very interesting. Like, things slow down a little bit as things move up, but not a ton. Like, the boosts and spikes are more related to what you do than any like planned progression curve or slowdown. And because it's a linear growth, and the growth is slow enough and things are dangerous enough and realistic enough, levels alone aren't going to be a deal breaker unless you're like tens of levels off. Because there's cases all the time of characters dealing with things that are higher level than them, things that are bigger threats. That's a huge part of Cralwer Carl. So it works out. So again, if we're looking at the progression, oh man, I hope that's not backwards for you guys. I hope that is actually readable, because I'm not going to be able to write backwards. But yeah, so VGO has the exponential decay progression. Cralwer Carl ends up having a linear one, even though mechanically it is designed to have an exponential decay one. Now, there's also opportunities for power spikes. That's more of an advanced topic that I may need to think about more. But when you're dealing with power progression and power and progression, consider whether you have anomalies or not, or whether you want anomalies to exist or not. When people do something exceptionally well, if they find a rare artifact, is that enough to really boost them way beyond what they can do? So I don't know why this popped into my head, but for example, Diablo 3, if you were able to get legendary gear from later in the game and equip it at the beginning of the game, that would change things drastically. It would give you enough power. It would triple your stats, and that would change everything at the beginning. But they set it up so that there are level caps and stat requirements, which automatically puts a gate on those things, and that's how they mitigate there being huge power spikes. So at your level, you finding a piece of legendary gear is not going to suddenly make your character broken. Usually it's not. There might be exceptions. I haven't played Diablo in a long time, but those kinds of games, that's generally how it seems to work. Dungeon Crawler Carl, there's the fan boxes and the prize boxes, and if you get a high enough tier one, that can be a game changer. In fact, that ends up being a major plot point in some of the books where things happen. It goes crazy. I'm not going to spoil it because you should definitely read Dungeon Crawler Carl. And a lot of people get celestial prize boxes. That is the highest tier of prize box. But because of how things happen, only one person ends up being able to open theirs and collect the celestial prize. And that prize is so potent that it gives him a huge spike in power and makes him one of the number one most powerful players for several floors. Like he is a serious problem for everybody and everything. He's basically invincible. He's a powerhouse because he just got this box. So the power level is linear, but there are opportunities for spikes and jumps. Kind of similar in VGO, depending on what you do, depending on the missions you get, there is some gear that can, not as massive, but can create some boosts. And when Jack gets Devil, his Shadow Drake, which, spoiler, yes, but he gets a Shadow Drake that he gets to ride around and talk to. So that's more of, I think, more of a teaser and draw-in than a spoiler. But that's another place where you've got some spikes and stuff going on. And oh, there's my eraser. Well, that's fine. I'll just grab a paper towel here. So that's Dungeon Crawler Carl and VGO. Hey, quick break. Just want to say, if you are enjoying this video, please do take a second to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell. It helps tremendously. And that's all I've got. So back to the content. The next one I wanted to talk about was Ascend Online by Luke Shmlenko. I don't know how to pronounce his name. It's very odd. And please do be dropping questions in here as we go. So yeah, thanks, Vader, for putting that in there. Ascend Online works a little different. The progression curve... Okay. VGO does something very interesting. Ascend Online does something very interesting. Where instead of it just being linear, there are linear portions. You then hit a wall until you are able to meet the requirements to progress forward. There's then a big jump, and then linear again, and then jump, and then linear again. So it ends up looking more like this. And by breaking it into these stages and these milestones, he's able to give each of these their own kind of progression curve, which overall the progression then ends up turning into exponential decay, just like you would expect with any other MMO, but it accelerates and decelerates slightly as you hit those different milestones. And the milestones that you hit are class related. So being a classless beginner, you have a set number of stats that you get every level. Then you hit your base class and you start getting additional stats. So your rate of power growth goes up and the abilities you get go up. You become more versatile, more powerful. Same thing when you hit your advanced class. And then I think there's a tier after that. So that's where these stages come in, right? It's going normal until you hit your base class, bump in power. And I think actually if I were to do this really accurately, the slope until base class is low, and then the power curve, the power arc gets steeper and steeper with each bump, because the difference between a beginner and their base class is small, but the difference between somebody who just got their base class and is about to unlock their advanced class is a much bigger gap, and so it grows faster for a relatively similar number of levels. Now, I really like Ascend Online, and I really hope Luke is able to finish the series. Let's see, what else did I want to talk about? Oh yeah, and he does the same thing with trade crafts as well, not just character class, but blacksmithing and leather crafting. You go through and you start hitting like the apprentice, journeyman, master tier, and when you hit was it journeyman? In like the last book that is out so far, they hit a new tier of crafting, which again, like I was saying, unlocks a whole new playing field. It goes from just being a thing that you progress to having its whole own skill tree and feats and abilities that you could develop around that specific craft, and then has more tiers for you to build through. So Ascend Online is a very interesting one because the curves change depending on where you are as you pass through these different milestones, which is part of why I wanted to mention it here. And next one I had to talk about was He Who Fights with Monsters, because I love me some He Who Fights with Monsters. And that one is interesting. The power arc is just straight up exponential. It's fairly normal for cultivation. If you haven't read He Who Fights with Monsters, there's normal tier, normal people. And then as you unlock essences, you start gaining powers. Once you get all of your essences unlocked, you enter Iron rank. And then you have to get all of your abilities unlocked and get all of your abilities to a certain level. Then you go to Bronze rank, then Silver, Gold, and Diamond. Now, something they talk about a lot is it has those spikes, kind of like I showed you with Ascend Online. It's actually very similar to Ascend Online in terms of power level. The difference between Iron rank 1 and Iron rank 9, which isn't quite how it works, but somebody who just started Iron and somebody who is getting close to move to Bronze is not that big. But every time you jump rank, there's a huge boost in power. You gain resistance to everything below your rank. So Bronze ranks, it is harder for an Iron ranker to fight a Bronze ranker than it is for two Bronze rankers to fight. And that disparity just gets bigger and bigger with each rank. So it is more difficult for a Bronze ranker to fight a Silver ranker than it is for an Iron ranker to fight a Bronze ranker. I hope that is making sense. I'm throwing out a lot of rank words. So it has these spikes, but then forms this overall exponential growth because each one, the step is bigger and bigger and bigger. Actually, yeah. So let me see if I can sketch this well enough for you guys to follow. So it looks something like this, because level up to Iron, boost, Iron up to Bronze, bigger boost, Bronze up to Silver, even bigger boost, and so on, which creates a interesting curve. And again, this is supposed to have a rapid exponential decay in terms of progression. This is also where we can run into some interesting things, because there's the mechanical setup and then there's what we see in the narrative. Now, anybody who has read He Who Fights with Monsters, feel free to disagree, correct me, or we can lead to a more interesting conversation about this. To me, as I got to later books, it felt like what we were experiencing in terms of the progression curve was not matching what was explained in earlier books. Because in earlier books, like I said, it's supposed to be like a pretty rapid exponential decay with the stages. So you can get through iron fairly easily and like a year or two. And then bronze is supposed to take you more than that. And then from like going from bronze to silver is supposed to take significantly more than that. And then silver to gold, much, much more than that. And then gold to diamond is just like huge. But then by the time we get to the end, it seems like those timescales have been compressed. And part of that might be narrative reasons of Shirtaloon or Travis just not wanting people to get bored and wanting to continue the progression. It still feels off because it's not just the main character either. There's other people where all of a sudden they're gold rank, and it was like a year or so of work. I'm like, I thought silver to gold took like decades of dedicated work, and that doesn't seem to be the case. So there's something where, to me, there seems to be a little bit of inconsistency of how it was presented and then how it's actually playing out. Now, we're hitting the point where I want to switch to the general Q&A and then just BSing about whatever. I have one more thing that I want to talk about, and that brings up another sort of aspect to the power curves. And that's just D&D. And I talked about that a little bit, right? You start above average person going all the way up to demigod. It's close to linear, but not quite, because of how the classes work. At different points, you don't necessarily at different points you get stat boosts and ability boosts. So actually, it's more of a stepper. So, and different thresholds will lead to bigger steps than others. And I'm just kind of making this up, so this isn't exactly right. But, you know, as you go from level to level, the boost in power you're going to get from one to the next is going to vary. And this is why I wanted to talk about D&D, is it has a general progression and then exponential decay for the progress. But the progress is then actually entirely up to the game master, because they can just decide to throw out experience however they want. So the actual progression curve in the system and the mechanics is exponential decay. Game master can overwrite that however they want. For good or ill, I've played with people where one of my games that I ran, and we were playing for like 6 years that's how long it took us to get to level 14. And then I was in another one where the GM seemed to level us up every single session, and he gave people any magic item they wanted, and then he wondered why everybody was freaking overpowered and just smashing through everything that he put forward. And he didn't control the progression curve. But the other thing that's interesting about D&D is the power arc varies from class to class. So there's an overall trend, which is what I showed you here. But then the different classes progress in different ways. So a fighter, in terms of mechanics, starts out stronger and gets some bigger boosts. But then as they go up, the steps and increases, they don't necessarily get smaller. They stay consistent. But wizards, on the other hand, and a lot of spellcasters, is they start with small steps. And then as they start getting to the bigger ranks, the power boosts get bigger and bigger as they're unlocking higher and higher level spells, which leads to an interesting place of, at the beginning, wizards are, oh man, I should have used two different colors. This is the wizard line. At the beginning, wizards are underpowered and easily die. And then by the end, they are often some of the main damage dealers for your party. And yeah, there's rogues and other things that can do that, but people who just rely on melee and without special abilities end up slowing down compared to magic users in certain blends as you get to the higher and higher levels. So yeah, that's what I had to talk about with you guys. That's what I had prepared. So yeah, I guess at this point we're just gonna shift into the Q&A, and you guys can fire away on questions. And that's it for this video. I hope it was helpful. I hope it was interesting. As always, you can leave questions in the comments below. I'm also going to leave some links in the description. So if you have some questions you want me to address in any of my live Q&As, or you have topics that you would like me to cover in these kind of live conversations, you can click those links, fill out the forms, and I will potentially cover your topic in one of these future live stream/video recordings. So thank you so much for being here, and thank you everybody for being so supportive in this kind of shift in format from what I was doing and what I would honestly prefer to do. So thank you again, and whatever you do, make sure that you keep writing and stay awesome.